NSC Backstage is live on your radios a Wednesday night in Music City, and it is time to discuss the beautiful game out of the bye week. My name is Will Bowling. That's Lucas Panzica. Jackson Williams makes the show happen. We are with you for the next hour talking Nashville SC with 2 matches to recap and 3 more until the next time we talk to you here on this radio program coming up in the next 7 days, starting Saturday in New Jersey. We've got USA Brazil. We've got Copa America. Lucas Panzica. We've got an hour to cover it all. How's it going?
Sure do. It's going great, Will, when we can fire up this show in the final minutes of stoppage time of what's been a phenomenal friendly between USA and Brazil. Obviously, the U.S. with Shaq Moore in the squad. He is on the field as we speak, playing right back for the U.S. national team, desperately needing a bounce back after the drubbing that the U.S. took against Colombia a few days ago. And I'd say they've acquitted themselves pretty well here. Obviously, there's still 2.5 minutes remaining in stoppage time, but it's been end-to-end, especially in this second half, and really fun to watch.
It's been incredible. You and I have been sitting here watching this, and we both had the same plan of maybe bring a meal to the station, prep for this show, and watch USA Brazil. I mean, you've had a free kick goal. You've had a Yunus Musa rocket from 30 yards for the United States at the crossbar. You've had Allison, the Brazilian netminder, making a save point blank on 2 separate occasions. And you've got maybe the best player in the world this year, I would say, Vinicius Jr. for Real Madrid, who has been cooking down the left wing for Brazil tonight. And the United States has looked pretty good.
Both goalkeepers have been fantastic in this
excellent.
one. Matt Turner, just from a pure shot-stopping perspective, has been phenomenal for the U.S. Allison as well, like you said. You got to give the U.S. credit here. That, the Musa strike is 4th, 5th minute, just from 25 yards out, an absolute frozen rope that hits where the crossbar meets the post there on the right side of the goal. But from there, U.S. has to kind of take some flurries, and to their credit, Will, they're playing bravely in this game. You got to give the U.S. that they're playing forward. They're trying to be expansive. They're trying to be vertical, and it's left them exposed at the back a few times. And in all honesty, it felt like when Rodrigo opened up the scoring in the first half, 1-0, felt like floodgates were getting ready to open. That hasn't happened. The U.S. has kind of grappled this game back, and we're into the final minute of stoppage time here, and it's just been back and forth. And look, I don't want to speak too soon or speak out of turn because Brazil is kind of starting to work their way into the final third, maybe so we've got a unique situation here on the show. But if the U.S. can hang on here for a 1-1 draw, I think you got to feel pretty good about where this squad is at, especially given how things went against Colombia heading into Copa America.
Well, the referee, we're going to give you a little bit of description of this because Shaq Moore is on the pitch. So yes. Nashville SC's first choice right back who represented the United States in Qatar at the 2022 World Cup is defending the best player in the world in 2024.
The Ballon d'Or favorite, we would say.
100%. And the Champions League winner, Vinicius Jr. We're going to do this and not violate the express written consent of U.S. Soccer and TNT. But Shaq Moore, I think, was just called for actually a pretty unlucky foul on a ball that I did not think was a foul. So there's one kick left in this game, Lucas Panzica, before we spend the next hour talking Nashville SC. And a couple of performances over the last week before the bye week that was this past weekend. Brazil is going to put this in the box. Matt Turner is going to punch it away. Let's see if they give him time for a corner kick. Looks like they are. So, again, we are, as play-by-play broadcasters, Lucas, in the unique position of doing play-by-play right now without really doing it, because I don't know how that really works.
Yes, definitely got to walk that line. I don't know if this will ever happen
again in the history of NSC Backstage.
No doubt. Man, what a world for Shaq Moore. I mean, this is why you love international soccer, right? Because you can go from defending 19-year-old, U.S. Olympic call-up Esmir Baraktarovic one day, and my goodness, goal line save there from Turner. I don't know.
Brazil not scored there.
I'm not sure how that didn't go in. That surely has got to be the last kick of the game.
Offsides, yeah.
Offsides, so it's probably going to be a 1-1 final here. But for Shaq Moore to go from defending Esmir Baraktarovic coming down the right side for New England Revolution, 19-year-old U.S. Olympic youth call-up, to Vinicius Jr., who's just helped lead Real Madrid to a 15th Champions League title. I mean, my goodness, it does not get more opposite ends of the spectrum than that. With all respect to Baraktarovic, who is a fantastic young player who Walker Zimmerman will likely be playing with in the Olympics coming up in Paris in a few weeks. But quite the experience for Shaq Moore, who I think we'd say got some quality minutes in for the U.S., provided a nice option off the bench at right back as the game does go final at 1-1 between the U.S. and Brazil. first ever draw between the United States and Brazil in the series history. It was 1 win for the U.S., 18 victories for Brazil. Never a draw until today.
So if you're wondering what we're talking about, and we're going to bridge the gap for maybe our diehard soccer fans that may be more familiar with the Vinicius Juniors and the Rodrigos and the Lucas Paquetás that are in this game for Brazil, more so than maybe Major League Soccer. We also want to bridge the gap of those of you who love listening to The Zone, have us on your presets, and are becoming soccer fans. Maybe you're a Nashville SC fan, you're understanding the game. The United States will play in Copa America. Coming up Sunday is when their group stage will begin. There with Bolivia, Panama, where we expect Anibal Godoy, Nashville SC midfielder, longtime Panamanian player, to be playing against the U.S. on June 27th before a July 1st game against Uruguay, which will be a barn burner. That will be excellent. But essentially, you have North American teams this year, Lucas, invited to play in the traditional South American Championship known as the Copa America. This will be the United States against the likes of Brazil, against Lionel Messi in Argentina, against Uruguay, against the best teams in South America, the best teams in North America, including Nashville SC players. Jacob Schaffelberg, who is with Canada this week for international friendlies, Anibal Godoy, who we mentioned, and also Shaq Moore with the United States. A great opportunity in a non-World Cup year. 2 years, actually, from the day the World Cup will begin in the United States. Literally today is when the United States will open the World Cup in 2026. A great summer of soccer upcoming.
Great summer of soccer. I was talking about this with Eddie Carvacho, who does a great job stepping in with us as the color commentator on a lot of these broadcasts for NSC on The Zone. He was with me for the New England game. He'll be with you Saturday for the kickoff at New York Red Bulls. But we were having this discussion on the air in the second half because Eddie mentioned New England Revolution, Nashville's most recent opponent, one of the 10 original MLS teams. And so I asked him because he brought up that he was at that first ever MLS game in 1996, the inaugural game in California. And we were just talking about where the league was in its initiation in the mid-90s, 2 years off of the 1994 World Cup, of course, here in America, and where the growth of the game was at that point. And just the full circle moment that we're kind of having now that we're, like you said, exactly 2 years away from the start of the 2026 World Cup in America, with this country in a completely different phase on where it stands in terms of the soccer hierarchy on the planet, and MLS in a completely different phase. And the idea of what Major League Soccer can be following the 2026 World Cup is really fun to think about when you consider the strides this league has made, even in just the last few years.
All right, so one more stat on the United States to wrap up tonight's coverage of U.S.-Brazil. Matt Turner made 11 saves versus Brazil. Wow. I think this is relevant to a lot of the audience who may have been watching on this day. That is the most by a U.S. goalkeeper since Tim Howard made 15 saves against Belgium in the 2014 World Cup.
That is
significant.
Some good company right there. Fantastic stuff. And look, this is not Brazil rolling out, their B or C squad here. I mean, this was very much, for the most part, a first team for the Brazilian national team. You had Vinicius Jr., you had Rodrigo up top, Lucas Paquetá, Gabriel Magalhães in the midfield. I mean, Alisson in goal, Endrick coming off the bench. This was not a situation like Brazil-Mexico the other day, a 3-2 win where largely, B squad players for the Brazilian national team. This is very much a first team for Brazil, and the U.S. handled themselves quite well. Shaq Moore handled himself quite well in the time that he came in late in the second half.
All right, Lucas, let's talk about the boys in gold. 2 matches to recap before the bye. Coming up in just about 10 minutes, we're going to catch up with New York Red Bulls radio play-by-play voice Matt Harmon, who has been the play-by-play voice of the radio side for New York since 2015. Always love catching up with him. He will join us to detail Nashville SC and New York Red Bulls, 2 teams that know each other very well and 2 teams that share quite a bit of similar history. We'll get to that coming up in just a few minutes. But, Lucas, before the bye week, Nashville went to TQL Stadium and ended FC Cincinnati's 7-match winning streak with several changes to the lineup. Drew Yearwood and Brian Anunga coming in midfield. Tyler Boyd on the bench. Sean Davis missing the squad. Teal Bunbury up top. Jack Mayer and Jacob Schaffelberg get the goals. What did you like the most about that performance?
I just loved the confidence from this team on the road against a Cincinnati squad that was on a 7-game win streak. And to kind of put that into context, a 7-game win streak at surface level in any league doesn't sound like anything astronomical. But the MLS record for consecutive wins, is 9. Right? In a league like MLS that is so expansive in its geography and how hard it is to play on the road with the different sort of geometries of the fields and the different environments you're playing in, it's so hard to string together consecutive wins in that way. Cincinnati was knocking on the door of history. That if they had beaten Nashville on that day, May 29th, that 8th straight win would have been one of only 2 teams in league history to accomplish that feat. Boys in Gold go into TQL Stadium, and they beat the hottest team in MLS with an expansive performance, I thought, especially in the middle of the midfield with the changes made by Rumba Muntali, bringing in Brian Anunga and Drew Yearwood. That just felt so complimentary in that game. And both just doing what they do, right? Yearwood was fantastic, I thought, as a ball progressor to kind of allow Mukhtar to ignite into the final third, and Anunga as just that ball-winning defensive midfielder covering so much ground. And it worked wonders for Nashville, not to mention just the confidence that came through, Will, in the little things, just in the way that they were combining out of tight spaces, right? Making decisions with the ball to go this way instead of that way, right? To look forward instead of a little dink backwards. Just little things like that I think has come down from Rumba Muntali in terms of the confidence instilled in this team, in terms of players being able to express themselves, and that it really shone through against Cincinnati. And Jack Mayer, Jacob Schaffelberg, the goal scorers, each getting their first goal of the MLS campaign.
And you see the value of Walker Zimmerman again within that team. And in the 7 games from April 27th to that point, when Walker Zimmerman came back from that game to the FC Cincinnati game, that was a 7-game stretch. Nashville conceded less goals than anyone else in MLS. Joint fewest goals allowed, with only 4 goals allowed in that 7-game stretch in Walker coming back. Walker did not even play the full 90 on that night against FC Cincinnati. In the 6 games Walker missed, Nashville conceded 15 goals. So certainly a big difference with Walker in that team. And I agree with you. A lot of what was good in the midfield are things that don't show up on the stat sheet. It's picking your moment to counter, to press, to sit back, to take the air out of the ball a little bit. I liked that a lot, and I totally agree with you. New England Revolution, Nashville falls 2-1, though, on the ensuing Saturday against a New England side more well-rested. They did not play in the midweek like Nashville did, who was on the road on a Wednesday night after going on the road on the Saturday night against CF Montreal. Lucas, Nashville had 17 second-half shots in this game. That is more than they average over 90 minutes, 72% possession. They hit the woodwork twice. And we're unfortunate in this one.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's no sugarcoating it, right? New England Revolution came into this game bottom of the Eastern Conference, bottom of the Supporter Shield standings, and anytime you're playing a Major League Soccer regular season game at home, the expectation is 3 points. And for a squad like Nashville, anytime you're putting up those type of numbers, as he said, season high 26 shots on the day, 17 in the second half to New England's 3, with those type of numbers, an XG number of over 3, you're expecting to take 3 points. And this is a New England side that is way too good to be bottom of the Eastern Conference. When you look up and down that team sheet, whether it is Carlos Gil as the catalyst at the 10, Giacomo Vrioni, the talent that he is as the DP number 9 that just hasn't broken through with the goals consistently enough this season, Thomas Shankalai, Esmir Baraktarovic, Matt Polster, Noel Buck, the young talent as well. You just go down the line. It's too talented a team led by a 2-time MLS Cup winning coach to be bottom of the East. So you kept that in mind going into that game. That's always a dangerous thing in this league when you're playing a talented team on a poor stretch of form where for the last 2 months prior to that game, nothing had broken. Nothing had gone right for New England Revolution. Things went right for New England Revolution in this game. Hani Mukhtar misses a penalty for the first time in 2 years. Alex Moyle with a big opportunity in the first half on kind of a rebound on an open net that goes over the bar. Just missed chances like that did come back around to haunt Nashville on that night. And wave after wave, they were able to progress the ball into the final third time after time in the second half. But a credit to New England, who got behind the ball after Esmir Baraktarovic's goal to make it 2-0 early in the second half. And Nashville was unable to break that down. New England gets a much desperately needed 3 points. And they follow that up with a 1-0 result against New York Red Bulls, who Nashville will have next on the road on Saturday. So New England turning things around a little bit at the expense of Nashville and Nashville's next opponent in Red Bulls, and you get into this break and you kind of revisit some of those things. Where's the missing piece there, right? On getting the ball into the final third and turning that into quality chances. 17 shots in the second half, yes, 3 of them on target, right? So how do you kind of connect those things to where you're doing that more in the run of play and getting those better looks to be able to take advantage of?
Just Nashville's second home loss of the seaseason, 3-2-5 at Geodis Park as they take this show on the road, taking on New York Red Bulls. Nashville 9th in the East. And has the tiebreaker on DC United, who has played one additional game to NSC as the Boys in Gold hit the halfway point of the MLS season this upcoming weekend in Hudson, New Jersey. And coming up next, we go straight to the source and get the scouting report on the team that has been the best at home since they joined MLS than any other team in Major League Soccer. 4th placed New York Red Bulls. They're unbeaten in 10 at home. And we get the scouting report from play-by-play voice Matt Harmon, who joins us next right here on NSC Backstage. Talking Nashville SC here on NSC Backstage 104.5 The Zone. Will Bowling, Lucas Panzica previewing Nashville SC and New York Red Bulls this upcoming weekend in Red Bull Arena. And joining us is the radio play-by-play voice of New York Red Bulls, Matt Harmon. Matt, we've had a lot of discussions, and it seems like these teams always get together in important parts of the season at the halfway point. This time, both teams coming off a loss to New England Revolution. What do you like about this New York Red Bulls team at this point of the year?
Yeah, who would have guessed that both teams have lost to New England the last couple of times out with the way their season has gone? Guys, first, appreciate you having me on, spending some time. If you would have asked me this last week, I would have said great start to the season, 100%. You would have had points in 13 of the first 16 games last week. I mean, listen, I guess if you want to take the positive side of it, New York was obviously missing a lot of guys. No Forsberg, no Morgan, no Tolkien, no Ayla, no Cornell, a couple other injuries, but still didn't play well and actually had chances at minimum to get a point out of that game. And I think that's one of those games, if you get a point and you look at who was playing, you say, okay, not our best, but you take the point and you go home and get ready for this weekend against Nashville. I actually think because of that, it puts a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth of a lot of players, coaches, fans, when you think, wow, we've done so well so far this season, and they have, no question about it, but you didn't want to lose that game to the Revs. I think this is an opportune time for New York to, again, do what they have been able to do all season long, which is when they've lost a game, they have responded with wins every single time after that. So I know Nashville playing much better than they have earlier in the year. I think it sets up to be a really fun game.
14 straight postseason appearances. It's incredible what Red Bulls have been able to do over such a long period of time. Nashville fans know intimately well how they were able to get to the playoffs, of course, last season. But we know the Red Bull way, Matt. What is different about this group? What makes this 2024 team unique to past Red Bull teams and their very recognizable style of play?
Listen, I love Nashville. I just want it on record with the fan base down there. I didn't bring up what happened last year. You brought that. What's different? I think a renewed sense of culture and enthusiasm, both on and off the field. On the field, I think the changes are very apparent. You've got a Lewis Morgan, and listen, he's going to be gone for potentially the next couple of games because he's with Scotland and had the late call-up, which is awesome for him. Not great for us because he has been lights out all during the course of the season. Combo him with the Forsberg, and I think from a tactical side of things, guys, you see a Red Bull team which is much more comfortable with possession on their half of the field and in the final third than they have been since I've maybe started covering the team back in 2015. That's been the biggest change. Defensively, a couple little blips on the radar maybe over the last decade, but usually a really good defensive team. And I would say the same so far again this season. But that's the biggest change, not the full in-your-face press 95% of the time. Okay to back off a little bit, play in a mid-block a little bit, and be better with possession. Those have been the biggest changes for me.
Matt Harmon, our guest, voice of the New York Red Bulls, leading up to Nashville SC at New York on Saturday. So you mentioned that vacancy of Forsberg and Morgan out, and you've had one game with those guys with their respective countries. Forsberg's impact, I think everybody around MLS kind of had a good idea of what that was going to be, but probably didn't expect this sort of resurgence from Lewis Morgan this season. So can you kind of contextualize for us just how big of a miss that is for this team right now and the ways they went about replacing those players against New England Revolution and how that might carry over on Saturday?
Well, clearly big. I mean, just from a numbers perspective, he's been the top scorer for this team. And the biggest change for me this year, and this is even pre-injury, he has come back faster and stronger than he was. I mean, you're talking about a guy who floated between, is he a 10, is he a winger, is he a 9? This year, he's a 9, and he has breakaway speed that we haven't seen since he's joined the team. So, yes, his miss for the next couple of games while he's with Scotland is big. The good, I would say, is you're getting an Emil Forsberg back who, when he did go and miss this past week against New England, he was really finding his way again. Clearly, I mean, you don't have to debate his talent and where he's come from, understands the Red Bull system. But I think just like any other player, maybe at times it took him a little bit to get his legs under him in Major League Soccer because it's a different league, different culture. I actually thought the couple of games prior, Charlotte and Orlando, you saw Forsberg at his best, which is creating and finishing. And the one thing that I would say all during the season this year has been him acting as a coach on the field. And we joked about it. Even week number 1, we saw it. You know, sometimes players, when they come into, in quotes, the Red Bull system, they struggle because it's played so differently than so many other areas. Well, you're taking a guy who's played it at an ultra high level with Leipzig for as long as he did. He is, in essence, a coach on the field. To the second part of your question, listen, Elias Manuel, Dante Van Zer, they struggled last week against New England. Have to be better. And if you're those two guys, and so much of the talk around this Red Bull team going into the summer transfer window is go out and get a 9. Go out and get a 9 along with Lewis Morgan because they're playing 2 up top. If I'm those two guys, I mean, I am chomping at the bit to take that as a challenge because you're already here. You're already developed in the system. But at some point, you know, my partner Steve Jonathan and I, we make the correlation. At some point, you have to produce. It can't just be you're getting chance after chance after chance. You've got to find ways to put the ball in the back of the net. You've got to be active in this system. So, you know, who plays up top this week? I don't really know the answer to that because Sandro Schwartz was very disappointed with the way his team performed in New England. I wouldn't be shocked, in addition to the players coming back, if we actually saw some other lineup changes on top of that.
Well, the thing about playing Red Bulls, Matt, is regardless of that personnel and those questions, whatever it might be, the identity is not going to change, right? It's probably the most established identity in terms of style of play around the world, not just Major League Soccer. So that's always part of the conversation here. With us on our show on Apple TV on Nashville SC Spotlight, it's kind of, okay, you know, it's Red Bulls week, so you got to be ready. You talk about the mentality, the intensity of playing New York Red Bulls. You know, it's kind of a pull your straps up sort of conversation leading into the game. I'm curious on the flip side, when you're preparing to play Nashville, what's that discussion like for you guys with the familiarity that's kind of been established now between these two teams? Certainly know what that discussion is for us, getting ready for Red Bulls. What is it up there in y'all's neck of the woods, talking about getting ready to play Nashville Soccer Club?
I mean, I think to be fair, anytime you, from our perspective, you look at Nashville, the conversation often revolves around Hani Mukhtar, you know, because he is so dangerous. He is so good. You know, and a guy that I think, at least from a comparative standpoint, Red Bull just saw in Carlos Heel. You know, both of those guys have the ability to float. You could say this is their position, but it's not. They go from sideline to sideline. They can go wherever they want. They can track back at the ball. They can go forward. They can stay high. He offers a really good challenge for this Red Bull team. Depending on, you know, who slides back into that back line, who's going to play the 6s for New York. I mean, it's been Amaya and Edelman. Those are the two guys to me that, when you've got a player like Mukhtar who does float as much as he does, that takes on a much different role. And then I think the other one is, you know, you said Red Bull week. Well, Red Bull week, when we play Nashville, it's almost like there's such a correlation and combination of the teams because of the guys you have. You've got Sean Davis, you've got Alex Muehl, you've got Drew Yearwood. You used to have Dax McCarty. Like, there's so much competition back and forth between these two teams because there's so much familiarity. So I would say those two, the familiarity of how to play against Red Bull because you have guys who played for Red Bull, and then how do you stop and slow down Hani Mukhtar?
Matt Harmon is our guest, play-by-play voice on the radio for New York Red Bulls. Matt, I got to just have a talking shop question for you real quick, because how do you have the energy to call a game an energy drink soccer as well, right? I feel like every time I try to do an ad read mid-game, somebody's losing possession and somebody's counterattacking. I mean, how have you gotten used to this over the years?
And are you required to have a Red Bull at your broadcast setup during every broadcast?
We actually, it's funny that you say that, because our comms guy, Zach, who is such a good dude and such an integral part of what we do on the radio side of things, I think we like busted his chops one week. We went somewhere and they had like drinks and snacks out for us. And we said, how come we don't even get that at home? So every week now we go up, we've got one can of Red Bull for me and one can of Red Bull for Steve. But yeah, I mean, listen, the pace, you get used to it. I would say that. Well, you get used to it because this is my 10th year of doing it. So you know when you can drop in this and when you can drop out that. I mean, fortunately enough, knowing the guys and our reads, like yours are, I'm sure, are pretty quick. You can figure out ways to get them in, but it does provide a challenge of knowing the transition from offense to defense, defense to offense. It can happen at the snap of a finger. And I can't tell you how many times in 10 years, Steve might have been in the middle of a point and he just says, I'm laying out. I'm laying out.
Right.
And it's kind of how we do it. So that's the beauty of radio. You can just say,
that's right.
I don't have to, I'm done mid comment.
Controlled chaos, no doubt about it. Matt, final one from me. When you look at some of the big names we've talked about, the Forsbergs, obviously Lewis Morgan and Van Zier, who is the unsung hero on this group? In a system like this, you got to have a lot of glue guys that can make this system work and do the job defensively and offensively. Who is the one player for you that's not discussed enough in the New York Red Bull squad?
I'm going to go 1A and 1B, if that's okay for
Absolutely.
you. 1A to me is Frankie Amaya, and 1B is actually the guy that plays right next to him, Daniel Edelman, because for different reasons. I think Frankie Amaya has been extremely underrated this year at that spot. And listen, if you play a 6, whether it's here in the United States or anywhere else in the world, you're probably not getting a ton of attention because you're not the big, strong center back that everyone looks at as the anchor of the defense. You're usually not pushing forward, getting goals. It's a workmanlike job, and especially in this Red Bull system. And I think Frankie's done a really good job this season in doing that. And I think Daniel Edelman's actually a really interesting one as well. Go back to the beginning part of the year and through the first 10 games before he got injured, 10 games, give or take a couple, Peter Stroud was playing out of his mind, fantastic, in one of those 6 spots. And Edelman, who was off on international duty, I think at this time, allowed Stroud to come in and play. Peter played really well, wound up getting hurt. Edelman pops back into the lineup. And to me, he's been a different player ever since. And I actually think the last couple of weeks, he's even progressed a little bit more. I won't tell you that I have talked to him about this. Full disclosure, I have not, because I haven't wanted to bring it up to him. I have to think he's not super psyched to not be on the Olympic team, and he is taking it out with his stats. And if you look at his numbers, he runs as much as any player on the field week to week for Red Bull. And I mean, it might just be me looking for those kind of unheralded guys. I think when you play a 6 in a Red Bull system, you're asked to do so much, and these guys have performed really well in doing it.
Matt, lastly, as you look at the Eastern Conference, which we knew would be loaded top to bottom coming into this season, about halfway through the regular season, when you look at the very top of it, obviously Red Bull's firmly in that race for a top 4 spot, and you look at what NYCFC has done in their in-season turnaround. And then you look at kind of that bottom churn of the East with clubs like Orlando and Atlanta and New England, who frankly nobody would have predicted to be dead last in the conference at this stage in the season, I don't think. What's more surprising to you? Some of those teams that are in the top 4, top 7 conversation, like a Toronto or an NYCFC, or some of those teams that have kind of toiled near the bottom, like in Orlando or in Atlanta?
How about both, Lucas? Because you just picked out a couple of teams. I would have never thought New England would have kind of bottomed out the way that they did. We've seen Orlando twice. A little bit surprised they haven't been able to figure it out, though I still think they could and will. And to me, Toronto might be the biggest surprise in the entire league, that they are flirting with a top 4 spot, because look at what's gone over there the course of the last couple of years, the coaching change, the kind of infighting that took place. They've turned it around. I think, to me, they have been, it's funny because after we play you guys, and then we've got a midweek game in Montreal, then we've got Toronto next Saturday. So I was trying to get ahead a little bit doing some prep, and I hadn't opened up my sheet from last year, which I save and then changes as needed. There are so many changes on that roster from one year to the next. Obviously, some of the big names are still there, but they're doing it with some pieces. I was kind of like, how are they doing this and being so good? To me, Toronto so far has been kind of the surprise of everything, at least for me.
Matt Harmon has been our guest, play-by-play voice of the New York Red Bulls on the radio side up in New York. Always love catching up with Matt. Great to get you on our airwaves. Really appreciate you doing this. And we just know that our teams will definitely come back together at another pivotal spot of the season, probably sooner rather than later. So I'm sure we'll do this again soon.
Well, if that's the case, it means it's been an okay year for both of us. So I think right now we signed for that, right? If we see in the playoffs, it means you made it. It means we made it. Hopefully it's one of those home and homes because I could listen. I'm not going to lie. I could use some good barbecue, so I'll head down to Nashville anytime. Thanks for having me on, guys.
There is Matt Harmon, the play-by-play voice for New York Red Bulls on the radio, and it is crazy, Lucas, how much beginning of the season this year, second week of the season last year, last game of the season last year, decision day 3 years ago. You get halfway point of the season this year. Whenever there's any kind of milestone in the MLS calendar, Nashville plays New York.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's almost odd, too, to just get one of these matchups that's just sort of buried in the midseason calendar. Feels like it's always right at the beginning or right at the very end. Like last season, like you said, match day 2, Nashville initially played Red Bulls, and then decision day. So midseason fixture here at New York Red Bulls. And it's interesting when hearing Matt talk about the sort of underappreciated guys that play for Red Bulls. I mean, who comes to mind for you with Nashville SC? Just kind of that unsung, hardworking player that just, if someone from another market were to ask you that question that you posed to Matt Harmon, who would you say?
I would say Jacob Schaffelberg.
Schaffelberg, yeah.
No
Schaffelberg
question.
is good.
Because I think locally we appreciate the step that Jacob Schaffelberg is taking. Canadian fans certainly understand who Jacob Schaffelberg is to them. Heck, he's scored important goals for the Canadian men's national team, but what he did against Lionel Messi and Inter Miami and the brace that he scored against Miami, the 3 goals in CONCACAF Champions Cup, the 3 assists already this year, I don't know if people nationally appreciate enough just how much he has improved since he got here.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm with you on that as a young player where the goal contributions have not broken through in a big way in MLS play. The majority of his goal contributions came in CONCACAF Champions Cup. I'd go with the former Red Bull and Alex Moyle. Just in terms of that kind of hardworking utility player. So just always interesting. There seems to always be so much overlap, especially with the amount of former Red Bulls that have come to Nashville. But look, every time these two teams have played, Will, with the exception of one meeting, which was a 2-0 result in favor of Red Bulls a few years ago, every other fixture in this series has been either scoreless, 1-1, or 1-0. So to me, if you're hoping to bounce back from that loss to New England at home and come out of the break with fresh legs and go on the road and get 3 points against Red Bulls, there's no way around you need a clean sheet. The history of this matchup has proven to us that you likely will not beat New York Red Bulls on the road unless there is a 0 on their end of the scoreboard. And that's going to be a challenge for Nashville, who's going to have to go back to adjusting to defensive life without Walker Zimmerman, which we saw them do for a few weeks. And I think it leveled off in a positive way towards the end there, but there was a tough stretch, like you mentioned, of those 15 goals conceded when Walker was out of the lineup injured. Well, Walker comes back in. He has certainly stabilized things with that foundation. Now he steps back out, played just last night with the U.S. Youth National Team in preparation for the Olympics. Likely will be one of 3 players over the age of 23 allowed to go with the national team to Paris for the Summer Olympic Games. Defensively, this is going to be a challenge for Nashville going up against likely Emil Forsberg. I don't know where we are on that.
Right.
If it's official that he's playing on Saturday. It was with the Swedish national team for a couple of friendlies last week. Sweden not in the Euros, which begin on Friday. So you'd figure that he's back in New York. They will be without Lewis Morgan, who has had a resurgent season, the number 9 with the Scottish national team for the Euros. So they'll be a little shorthanded. Nashville will be a little more shorthanded without Walker Zimmerman, without Jacob Schaffelberg, likely without Shaq Moore and Anibal Godoy. But still, I don't think there's any way around it, Will. A clean sheet on Saturday feels like the first step in the path to 3 points.
New York Red Bulls are unbeaten in 10 straight home matches dating back to last season's playoffs. They had a thrilling 2-game set with FC Cincinnati, and Cincinnati did end up getting the best of them. That is New York's longest home unbeaten run in all competitions since a 16-game stretch that ran from April 2016 to the end of that year's regular season. Lucas, since Red Bull Arena opened in 2010, New York has more wins and more points at home in Major League Soccer. That's 15 seasons of 138 wins and 467 points at home. This team set an MLS record last season of shots against as well. They are high press. We call it energy drink soccer for a reason when you play New York Red Bulls, not just because of their mascot, their nickname, but because they press every pass, every move, everything that you do. There are two Red Bulls players there to greet you and to try to immediately win the ball from you, regardless of where you are in the field. They're the only team that did not face 100 shots on target in MLS last year. They faced 85 shots on target in 34 games last year. For perspective, Nashville had the joint best defense in the league last year in terms of goals allowed. They gave up 50 more shots than New York Red Bulls did. 132 total, the boys in gold did a season ago. At home in Red Bull Arena, I think there is not a more difficult road trip over the last decade of Major League Soccer than in that building against these guys.
Yeah, and that's been the case, Will, regardless of the quality across the squad.
100%.
And Red Bulls has always played in that manner, right? And there's a reason why they have that playoff streak that you referenced with Matt Harmon just a few minutes ago. But the quality is now at a different level with that team. Even with just Emil Forsberg alone stepping in and then John Tolkien taking another step. There are a lot of different elements of this squad that they have not had. With that, even with that floor of making the playoffs, the ceiling feels much higher with this Red Bulls team. So that challenge doesn't go away. And we talked about this with Jalil Anibaba, who was able to give us the player perspective just earlier this week on Spotlight, which you can go watch on NSC's team homepage on Apple TV. Comes out every Wednesday afternoon. But Jalil talked about just the sheer mentality that you have to prepare yourself for as a player when getting ready to play New York Red Bulls, especially on the road. It's going to be a big challenge for Nashville, who has the benefit of fresh legs with the break, but obviously having to overcome the players gone with national teams, which any quality team in MLS with quality players is having to deal with this time of year. So something to overcome in what will certainly be a physically and mentally challenging fixture Saturday night.
Coming up next, we'll wrap up the show here talking Nashville SC on NSC Backstage. We'll take a look at what Roomba Munthali has been able to do since taking over as Nashville SC's interim head coach and the keys to getting a lot of points with a lot of games coming thick and fast over the next week. Lucas Panzica, Will Bolding with you. We'll wrap it up talking soccer coming up next on 104.5 The Zone. Live at 104.5 The Zone, NSC Backstage. Wrapping up the show. Will Bowling and Lucas Panzica with Jackson Williams, our producer. We are back on your airwaves this Saturday as Nashville heads to Hudson, New Jersey, taking on New York Red Bulls. We mentioned the home field advantage, the fact that these guys are terrific when they play at home, fourth place side of the Eastern Conference. 6 o'clock pregame coverage, 6:30 kick with myself and Eddie Carvacho, who has been a terrific addition, I think, Lucas, we both agree, to our broadcast team this year.
No doubt. Eddie is the man. Great experience when you talk about the roots of American soccer and that transition from the pre-MLS days to where the league is now. Great perspective, and always enjoy having him.
So, Lucas, Rumba Muntali talked after the New England game about the opportunity Nashville has to take time in this break, an international break that was going on last week, and continue to build connections. We've got the audio for you of Rumba Muntali talking to the media and had this to say, Jackson, if we're ready for that, about what this week off was going to look like for the boys in gold.
I think just the connections between the different functional groups and making sure that we're all aligned, through different moments of the game so that hopefully we see the same picture or try to problem solve as a collective through this, those same pictures. So working on our connection between the functional groups, making sure that we're aligned there, continuing to implement some offensive structure that we'd like to see, and still continuing to work on the defensive stuff where I think we're sound, but always trying to improve and get better.
So, Lucas, over the last 4 games, talking about that offensive structure, the midfield connecting, and partnerships being formed, Nashville has averaged just under 15 shots per game over the last 4 games. Leading up to that point, they had averaged just over 10 shots per game. That's obviously a very small sample size. Nashville has been healthier over the last 4 games than they were to start the season. But the importance, I think, Lucas, cannot be understated of Nashville being off this past weekend when it would have been very shorthanded, and Rumba Muntali having the opportunity for kind of a mini training camp.
Yeah, not a lot of teams played last weekend in MLS, but Nashville certainly fortunate to be one of the teams off, just to not have a game fall during that international break or that time where you're missing players. And look, it's worth noting that it's not official that Jacob Schaffelberg will be with Canada for Copa America. It's not official that Shaq Moore will be with the U.S. for Copa America. And look, Anibal Godoy, same thing, but he is the heart and soul of that Panamanian national team. I think we'd all be very surprised if Anibal Godoy is not missing for a few weeks. And with Shaq Moore's performance today, coming off the bench for Joe Scally, who, by the way, had a phenomenal performance.
It was amazing
for the U.S. against Brazil today. But Shaq Moore picked up right where Scally left off against Vinicius Jr. And I'd venture to guess that Shaq Moore will be on the U.S. squad for Copa America. Jacob Schaffelberg has been a spark for Canada off the bench as well under manager Jesse Marsch. So is it fair for us to sit here and say the expectation is all 4 of those guys, Zimmerman, Moore, Schaffelberg, Godoy, will be out for that time frame as long as the U.S. and Panama and Canada are in their respective competitions?
So, Rumba Muntali, with this opportunity, Lucas, you talk about the relationships, the connections. I think a lot of times, maybe it's us, maybe it's me playing EAFC and FIFA, think that you put the best overall players and the players with the highest rating on the field, and it automatically clicks, right? It's the instant gratification culture. It's the fantasy football culture we have of get as much talent and raw ability on the pitch with any sport on the field and make it work. There are connections that have to be formed. And when you talk about Dan Lovitz playing with Tyler Boyd maybe on the left side, with Jacob Schaffelberg, who is out, with Alex Muil, who is perhaps going to be put in different positions to cover for Nashville players if Shaq Moore is out with the U.S. men's national team in Copa America. We talk a lot with the coaching staff about relationships being formed and connections. I thought we had an insightful conversation with Jacob Schaffelberg a few weeks ago where he said, I can give Dan Lovitz certain looks, and he knows where I'm going to be. Like, he knows how to talk to me mid-game. I know how to communicate with him. We are on the same page. That's important in a time like this, I think. And as Nashville maybe freshens up the system a little bit, maybe goes back to a lot of what worked last year, those interpersonal relationships between a Drew Yearwood and a different back line between Drew Yearwood and different wingers, Alex Wheel on the right versus the left or at right back, and whatever it may be. Important for Rumba Muntali to have that opportunity to mold some of those relationships over the last week.
Yeah, exactly. And what an opportunity to do it against Red Bulls, where those relationships are so key on the field. I mean, you talk about quick snap decision making and the necessity of having that against this high pressing Red Bull side. The cliche is to be 2 steps ahead of your opponent. Against New York Red Bulls, you got to be 2 steps ahead of your own teammate, right? You have to be thinking about where they want to go with the ball before they are to be in the right position, because it's all about quick decisions, quick movements to get out of that press and initiate something going forward. And that's really where the difference has come, right? Under Rumba Muntali, even if it's just a mentality. Well, I would attribute the way Nashville's been able to push forward under Rumba Muntali in his time as interim manager almost more to the mentality and kind of the freedom he's given his players in their decision-making, more than just the formation switch.
Yeah, right.
Right? With the 4-4-2, and Nashville's back to a back four. That's a very comfortable spot for a lot of players. But I really think the confidence Rumba's instilled in these players has allowed Nashville to have that possession more with purpose, to progress the ball at a higher rate than they were previously. Of course, the next step is to take advantage of those chances, something Nashville did not do against New England Revolution, right? A penalty kick miss, other opportunities at hitting the post in the second half. Taking advantage of those chances and being clinical with them is kind of that next step, which they did do against Cincinnati in that 2-0 result. The good news for Nashville is they have the luxury of 2 of their 3 designated players not stepping away for international duty, right? Sam Surridge is here. Hani Mukhtar is here. For a lot of quality MLS teams, your designated players are likely stepping away. That's not the case for Nashville. They have their 2 most important goal contributors available to them for the next few weeks.
It's going to be a fun couple of games and a fun week, a busy week for Nashville SC. Once again, another 3-match week that begins Saturday. 6 o'clock pregame coverage is when you'll hear myself and Eddie Carvacho bring you Nashville SC and New York Red Bulls. Wednesday, Nashville gets Toronto FC, a team it just beat 2-0 about a month ago. They will see the Reds up at BMO Field on Wednesday before coming back and finishing up another New York week. This happened last year where they played New York teams in quick succession. Match day 1 and match day 2 last season. They get the Red Bulls on the road Saturday night. They host NYCFC next Saturday night in Geodis Park, a team that I think Lucas has been one of the surprises of the season in the MLS Eastern Conference, to say the least.
Biggest surprise turnaround of the season, and I don't think it's close. I mean, you were talking about manager Nick Cushing potentially being the first manager out in MLS, and now here they are, 3rd in the Eastern Conference and only 6 points back of Miami at the top of the Supporters Shield, tied on points with Nashville's very next opponent in New York Red Bulls. Another thing about this upcoming stretch, very away heavy. A lot of road games coming up for Nashville, at New York Red Bulls, at Toronto next Wednesday. Then, yes, you come home for back-to-back home games against NYCFC and Miami, and then it's at Columbus, at Portland, at D.C. So a lot of road trips coming up, Will. Important to get the points wherever you can starting on Saturday.
And we will be there every step of the way. Nashville SC, New York Red Bulls, 6 o'clock the next time we talk to you this Saturday night. And that does it for NSC Backstage. Always check out the podcast wherever you download audio to get every episode here Wednesday nights on The Zone. For Lucas Panzica and Jackson Williams, our producer, I'm Will Bowling saying good night. Saturday night in New York. It's NSC and Red Bulls next time we talk to you.